Welcome to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm John Dykes and it's Thursday. So for the ACSOM Bulletin, I'm joined by Declan, McConville and JP Mason. No matter where you are in the world, JP, you dial in to talk all things Celtic. How are you doing?
I'm good, yeah. Wouldn't miss it. There's too much to talk about, so here I am.
Well, I sometimes feel sorry for you guys if we've had a big game at the weekend because you're having to wait until Thursday, certainly to speak to ACSOM on the ACSOM Bulletin about it. So we will definitely be covering it. I think most things have been said, but I always want your views on what we did wrong, what could have been better, and where it leaves us. But the big story really is, the transfer window, the first transfer window. Deck, I'll come to you first. We heard Ange and Dom in their joint press conference when they spoke to the fan groups, and thankfully ACSOM was part of that. And he was talking about recruitment, Dominic Mackay, and as was Ange, and they were talking about also youth development, sports science. But I think it's been a case of let's prioritise trying to get the squad in order. And we'll come back to some of the other elements of that. And we've brought in 12. We've brought in a dozen what you could consider first-team players, and we'll go through some of those in a wee bit more detail, Deck. But as an overview, how happy have you been with the transfer window, and where can you see there still being gaps?
In May, the squad itself looked as if it was heading towards disaster. Obviously, our captain was departing. We had a group of loan players that were going to leave the club. We already knew that there was a group of players at the club that, didn't want to be there, close quotation marks. So there was all these different factors. A rebuild was always going to be very difficult under normal circumstances, never mind during a pandemic. But 12, basically, as you say, to first team, probably 10 first team, minus Urigidi and Shaw have came in, and they've all kind of hit the ground running. They've settled in right away. A lot of them have hit the ground running, as I say. Kyogo, Hart, Abada, to mention but a few. And it's promising. Again, no, I don't want to jump too far ahead of myself, because last year I thought the business that we did in the window in terms of a Uruguayan left back, goalkeeper and striker at £5 million each, best young player in Scotland and David Turnbull, it was good business, and the Republic of Ireland captain as well, and Duffy, and look how that turned out. So I won't get too far ahead of myself. There is still worries with it, especially in the positions of a kind of 8 and a 10 in the midfield in terms of the depth there. But to bring in 10 first team starters with no head of recruitment there, no director of football, head of football operations, whatever you want to call it, I think is pretty decent. So we'll see how it goes. But again, give it a bit of time and then judge it in hindsight.
What about yourself, JP? Like Declan said, obviously we comment on what you see in front of you. And this time last year we were talking about the transfer window. The fact that Celtic had probably taken a different approach, gone down south and plucked out English Premiership players, although some of them were out of favour, £5 million Greek international goalkeepers, etc., etc. And we know how that turned out. So I'm going to be very careful as to rating the transfer window, because I thought it was a really good transfer window this time last year. Turned out to be the opposite. How happy are you, and do you have any concerns? I mean, Declan's mentioned the midfield areas. What are your concerns in terms of gaps in the squad?
I would say a bit of concern about the midfield, just purely because of the way that we're playing. And quite a few people have mentioned that. Obviously, it's really intense, and you don't want them. And Ange Postecoglou has already said that there's a potential that there'll be a burnout, and doesn't want the likes of Anthony Ralston playing 60 games a season. But then, why should it just be about Anthony Ralston? There's other players there. Are they supposed to play 60 games a season? I hope not, because you'll not get the same levels out of them. I think you can already see, maybe it was just that game on Sunday, but you can already see, a bit of a dip off in terms of the midfield. I didn't think the midfield performed well at all on Sunday. I thought, by and large, we were not the most effective players in that part of the park. So I would have concerns a bit on that. But overall, when you look at the turnover, I mean, it's an insane amount of players to have come out, to have left and to come in, and in fact, on a pertinent note, 3 years ago today, we played Rangers and beat them 1-0 at Celtic Park. And the team that day was Craig Gordon in goal, Mikael Lustig at right back, Dedrick Boyata, Christopher Ayer at centre half, Kieran Tierney at left back, Olivier Ncham and Scott Brown in the midfield, James Forrest, Tom Rogic and Callum McGregor with Edouard up top. And the Rangers team in that game, McGregor in goal, Tavernier at right back, Katic, who's just departed on loan, quite strangely, Goldson, Barisic, Jack Ejaria, can't even remember who that was, Kent, Arfield, Morelos, and some guy called Kyle Lafferty. So their team is by and large the same 3 years on. I mean, that is, 80% the same team? And we've completely changed our entire team. Like, there's only McGregor, Rogic and Forrest left from that team. Everybody else is away. So it's completely flipped.
It's an incredible turnaround in staff and players. And again, I don't want to labour this, but there are legacy issues there, JP, in the fact that the squad hasn't been managed properly. Therefore, you're having to do such a facelift on the side in one transfer window. In terms of one transfer window, it's a huge upheaval. Loads of comings and goings, and we'll talk about some of those who have departed Celtic Park finally. Lee Griffiths is still being asked questions about Neil Lennon. The press are trying to still, squeeze as much as they can out of that one, the tit for tat. But let's talk about some of the guys that have left then. So Lee Griffiths, at the beginning of the season, Declan, you weren't happy he was given a contract in the first place for 2 pre-seasons in a row. He wasn't part of the pre-season plans because of his own issues, sent home from Wales this year, not taken to France last year. We've finally offloaded him. It's on loan. It's Dundee. And he's been speaking about his relationship with Neil Lennon. He wants people to concentrate on what he does on the park. I know the answer to the first question. Are you happy that he's been offloaded? But do you think that he will ever be able to concentrate on the park? I mean, is he ever going to overcome these issues that have kind of dogged the last 5 years of his career?
Well, I think even the way the news broke, again, begged questions, because Celtic or Dundee hadn't even confirmed that Lee Griffiths had either departed the club or joined Dundee. He broke it to a journalist over a FaceTime call with his son, and that's how the news came out. So again, it's always a sideshow with Lee Griffiths. It's a constant distraction that Celtic don't need. I'm glad he's departed the football club, because after the way I saw the crowd mixed reaction at the West Ham game, this was becoming a sideshow. It was a sideshow that the manager didn't need. It was a sideshow that the players didn't need. And in terms of where he's been at last pre-season and been left out going to France with the way he turned up, obviously everything that surrounded these allegations this year as well, I just think it was too much of an issue for the club. And the whole tit-for-tat thing with Neil Lennon is just boring everybody now. Nobody cares. Both of them aren't at the football club. I don't know why Lee Griffiths feels a need to constantly go on about it. And I don't know why Neil Lennon, when he gets asked about it, wants to go on about it. The two of them are departed. It's just time to move on.
Absolutely, time to move on into a new era. JP, the parting words were, he is out of a job now and he is trying to keep himself relevant. So, I mean, let's talk about the football. However, I think it is a sideshow that has finally left the building. The other one that I find quite an interesting one as well is Olivier Ncham. So he had a year left of his contract that was torn up, and obviously some kind of financial deal was agreed upon between the club and Ncham, and he goes and gets a 3-year deal down at Swansea. I mean, is this another player that you think will constantly disappoint? Do you think he'll fail to fulfil his potential? Because there's no doubt that he's a very technically gifted player, Olivier Ncham. JP, we've seen flashes of that at Celtic. We've never seen it on a consistent level. It seems a shame that at one point we were apparently getting big bids from Porto. It ends up costing us money to rip up his contract. Again, a total issue from the old regime that was inherited by Dominic Mackay and Ange Postecoglou. They've decided to cut their losses on him. Do you think he's a player that will ever fulfil his potential?
I don't know. I find that a really strange one with Olivier Ncham. And in fact, that game that I was referring to, that was 3 years ago today at Celtic Park, we won 1-0, and the match winning goal was Olivier Ncham. And I mean, It was. I mean, you think to yourself that's where he was at one point. He was a starting player in a game against Rangers, so he was trusted by the manager to start a game of that magnitude, and he scored the winning goal in it. And I'm pretty sure he played well, and from what I can remember, he played well in that game. It wasn't just like he just turned up and scored the goal and didn't do anything else in the game. Everybody saw that he had an amazing game in him, every now and then, but they were sort of, he cherry picked his games, didn't he? It was whether or not he fancied it on that particular day. There was the talk of the Porto move. I don't understand why we didn't just, you've got a really good financial offer and the player wants to go, but you don't let them go. I mean, that's bananas to me. I just don't. That doesn't make any sense to me at all as an operation. And it's come back to bite us because it's cost us money further down the line. We've had to rip up his contract, and look where he's ended up. He's not ended up at Porto or Marseille. He's ended up at Swansea City. No disrespect, but I'm sorry, but a product of Man City's youth academy, who we paid $4.5 million for, and has the experience, title-winning experience, European experience, Lazio, and all that. A player like that should not be at Swansea City. So that suggests to me that there's a problem in his world rather than anything else, because it's down to his application, his attitude that has got him that move. And fair enough, he'll be earning a lot of money. I say a lot of money, I mean in relative terms, but he's not doing what Kieran Tierney is. He's not doing what Stuart Armstrong is or Christopher Ayer. He's down a division, and arguably he could have been and should have been up in their neck of the woods. On Griffiths, very briefly, time will tell at the end of this season whether or not the problem is Celtic or the problem is Lee Griffiths. Because if he turns around at the end of the season and he's got the goals that he says he's got in him, and he's got the minutes in his legs that he says he's got in him, then we'll have to be like, okay, well, fine. There was obviously an issue between you and Celtic, but again, time will tell. I think Lawrence said yesterday, he needs to stay off the front pages, and he doesn't think he will. So being in an environment like Dundee, where it's a bit of a spicy dressing room, and who knows and who knows what the professionalism. Who knows what I don't want to call it a question that their professionalism, but will it be as good as it is at Celtic? I don't know.
Well, listen, it came up, as you say, Lawrence brought it up the other day, and you think to yourself, sometimes a group of players work well together because there is that bond in the dressing room. But I mean, when I look at that dressing room and you look at Paul McGowan and Jason Cummins and Lee Griffiths, I think from a manager's perspective, it would be hellish to try and manage those three. Honestly, it would be hellish. We'll get back to Charlie Adam, JP. There's a wee linkage there between Charlie Adam and Eddie, so I'll come back to him. Declan, when you look at Ncham, and I'm going to also speak about some of the departures in terms of what next, would it surprise you, going on everything that JP said, and which I totally agree with, if he was to get another big move from Swansea, and he was in the press, let's say, in a couple of years' time, and he's secured a massive move for a big fee? Would that surprise you? Do you think that he's capable of doing that?
He probably is capable of doing it. I think at times in a Celtic jersey, we all saw that he was capable of doing that. It's all about application. It's all about what you give. And again, the style of Swansea's play, I don't really know much about Swansea since they've dropped into the Championship after leaving the Premier League. But yeah, it depends, again, what kind of season Swansea have, whether they're pushing for promotion into the Premier League and how big a part he plays in that. But the ability is there. It's just about application. But I don't know if I'm wrong on this, but when he went to Marseille last season on loan, I don't think he played a lot of football at first. I think he was kind of in and out of the team. Villas-Boas left the building when he arrived. So I don't think he showed too much at Marseille to merit the big move. So again, it's just all down to him. But wish him all the best, because he gave me one of the best nights of my life in Rome. So I'll let him off it for that. But yeah, if he gives all he can do, I don't doubt that he could get another big move. But again, that's up to the player.
Absolutely. Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me either, to be totally honest with you. I want to dip into the comment section because we are streaming on a number of different platforms. Welcome to the show if you're watching on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch. If any other platforms become available, we'll be broadcasting on there as well. But I'm going to start off with this one. Paddy. How you doing, Paddy? Paddy Lavery. Who won the Platinum Disc? That's a good question. I've got it just over here. Now, that's the latest one, JP. We bit of the old Fratellis. Costello Music. Chelsea Dagger. Sometimes played at Celtic Park to this day. Used to be played far more regularly. Yeah. This is one of the official ones. I know that you get companies that make them up and all this, but this is a BPI certified for double platinum, 600,000 copies of the Island Records album Costello Music, as presented in 2006 to John Fratelli, big Celtic man. So the question is, who won it? Because all you do is you subscribe to a Celtic State of Mind by visiting a State of Mind on YouTube, which is free, and you go into a monthly draw. And that was last month. It's just I've kind of been a wee bit busy because we've got a music festival tomorrow that we're covering as well. So I've not announced it, but I'm going to announce it right now. And the winner of Costello Music's Platinum Disc is Tony Cassidy. Now, Tony pops in and out of the comments, which is great, as does Mick Nolan, who won the Verve one. So, Tony, I will be in touch or get in touch with us, and we will arrange to either send this or drop it off to you as soon as we possibly can. So, well done. If you want to be in with a chance of winning brilliant prizes, just subscribe on YouTube. It's free of charge. And like I just said there, we cover other things other than Celtic. I'm going to a festival tomorrow where Las Vegas, Kyle Faulkner, the Sherlocks and others are playing in Dalkeith, and we are on the media duties, JP, and we've even got furry muffs for the occasion with Dukla Prague-esque badges on them. So it's all happening. Brilliant. Really looking forward to that. The Urban Cool Shit. Interestingly, Las Vegas and Kyle Faulkner, Celtic fans. Well, two of Las Vegas are in it.
Played at Celtic Park as well. They played in one of those games.
That's right.
Kyle Faulkner's got a really good story about Martin O'Neill, I'm sure, so you should probably ask him about that if you get the chance.
I will try. I quite like his latest album, to be fair. The Urban Cool Shade, welcome back to the show. You're watching on YouTube. We have to be within 4 points of the league leaders at Christmas to win this. I may have mentioned this before, but losing the title is not an option this year. I don't think it is an option, and that's why the headline along the bottom of the page here, will these dozen new arrivals be enough to close the gap? I mean, for so long we were talking about mind the gap, JP, and now it's flipped, to use a Boiseism. It's flipped, and we're trying to close the gap. And the question is, we're kind of taking it in stages. So a massive restructuring job is required. Put that on the back burner just now. Focus on the players. 12 incomings. Loads of players leaving. Do you get the sense, JP, that this is almost, let's get up to January. We know there's a few gaps there. Let's get up to January. And then we can go again. And there'll be a far busier transfer window in January than there was January past. Do you get that vibe?
Yeah, I think that I said this before a few times, that the market's really weird at the moment. It's just, it doesn't feel the same, and it didn't feel the same in the last few weeks and months. The level of player movement wasn't as much as it normally is. Another team in Glasgow didn't even have any bids for any of their players, so things like that. And they've all won the league, and are supposed to be this unbelievable team. Why was there no bids for those players? I'm not saying it's because they're poor players, but I'm just saying it's because the market isn't as it normally is. And so I think we were very fortunate to get the money that we got for Odsonne Edouard with a year left, to get anything at all for Ryan Christie when he could walk away for nothing in January was decent. But I think, January will probably be, I would hope anyway, would be a bit of an easier market to operate in, and we can see how we go to it between now and then. I think Scales has flown under the radar a bit, and I've read enough about this guy and watched his interview yesterday, and I jokingly tweeted and said Liam Scales CSC, in the hope that might be brought back in a year's time to as some sort of premonition. But there's something about this guy that I think he's going to be good, and I think he might end up playing first team football. He's been given the number 5, which is a pretty good, it's a pretty good level of intent by the club, and giving him a first team squad number. So I don't know. I think Scales could be the dark horse of the transfer window. The rest, obviously, Jota is an unknown quantity to me. I don't know much about him. But if you've got a price tag like that at the end of this season-long loan, he's got to be decent. And Carter Vickers, Spurs fans apparently are not bothered about losing him, but I mean, I'm pretty sure Spurs fans weren't that bothered about losing Joe Hart, and look what Joe Hart's done at Celtic, you know. So if Carter Vickers can come in and do a similar job in terms of tightening up that defence, and, you know, guy's 6'1", is he? You know, he's got to be better in the air than what we've got at the moment, and more commanding. And would he have dealt with that corner on Sunday?
This is a big question, isn't it? I mean, you brought up Liam Scales. We were kind of crying out, Declan, for centre halves because, you know, we're playing at the moment Starfelt and Welsh, and there are still deficiencies there. I didn't want to go in studs up on any of the two of them. I've championed Welsh. I like him as a player. Starfelt's settling in. Thought he did okay against Rangers, for example. But as JP says, a very simple kind of defensive situation to be in is to defend that corner. I mean, to the point where, you know, world football's changed so much, and there's a great book called The Numbers Game, which basically says when you actually look at the figures, it's not worth your while flighting a corner in. You're better not crossing it. And some clubs got wind of that a few years ago, and they played the short corner just to get the ball back into the field of play and keep the possession. It would seem that the only team that you should probably flight a corner in against is Celtic, and it's still the situation. I mean, the percentage was so low around the world, unless you're playing Celtic, should be the caveat. We still can't defend it. I mean, I've loved the fact that bringing in Carter Vickers has brought its own wee story as well, to be fair, and we'll cover that. But we were calling out for centre-halves, but when you actually look at the transfer window as a whole, we brought in Urhoghide, we brought in Starfelt, we brought in Carter Vickers, and also the man mentioned by JP there, Liam Scales, who can play centre-half or left-back. So we've actually brought in 4, and we've got Julien to return as well. But I do think we needed that 11th hour arrival. What's your thoughts on the centre-half position and how strong we are there, Dec?
I think if you look at the Hearts game, when he went with Beaton and Starfelt made his debut that night, it was the wrong decision. You know, we've seen that Welsh has come into the team and it's been very settled between the two of them again. That's been positive because we changed so much between that centre-half position last season. But that showed you the lack of depth in that position. Again, if you look at Midtjylland away, after Beaton's stupidity at Celtic Park, you're trusting the young boy Murray to come in and do the job. So I think you did need that 11th hour signing because it's 2 players in each position there. At centre-half, you now get 4 that you would trust in the boy Murray. And again, it even probably makes near Beaton, dare I say it, a midfield player again, because we've used him so much as a centre-half for about 4 years now. But again, when he first came to the club, and people forget, under Brendan Rodgers at the very start of that 2016 season, he played in central defensive midfield. He played in the 5-1 game in a central defensive midfield role. So I think we definitely did need that 11th hour signing. It will push the guys that are already there. It will only help, I would say, Welsh and Murray's development as well as young centre-backs. But it's an area I would say that we're definitely stronger in now. With Julian coming back than we once were, because last season we depended so much on Chris Ayer. He is going to be a miss, but I would say we've brought in suitable replacements in that position now. But again, people will look towards the 2 first-team coaches. Again, there's been a lot made about, John Kennedy's the defensive coach. He's not his assistant manager and first-team coach, as well as Stephen McManus. But surely the basics are defending with 2 guys there. They can do something about it, because it just at times it just looks so simple. I know we're cynical as football fans when we look at it, but we've got 2 guys in there that, one is a highly rated coach in John Kennedy by many people, and another former Celtic captain, both centre-halves. So yeah, I think we did need that 11th hour signing, and it definitely adds a bit of depth to that back four, and you're not worried that if you pick up an injury in there, you know that we'll be okay.
JP reckons that Liam Scales will be the dark horse of the transfer window. When it became evident that he was coming to the club and we start speaking about it on ACSOM, I kind of bracketed him, I guess, with Liam Shaw and Urhoghide. I thought he's going to be one of the guys that's maybe on the periphery of the first team. And the comments that started coming in pretty quickly were, "You're wrong. This guy is he's a first team player, and the Shamrock Rovers fans that tuned in, or those with a persuasion for the Irish League, were informing me and educating me on the fact that this guy is better than a fringe player. Would you subscribe to that, Deck, that maybe he's going to be the dark horse of this transfer window?
Possibly, yeah, especially with that kit number, giving him number 5. £500,000, I think, was the price tag on him. It's a decent amount of money. It's not obviously in the millions, but he's played a lot of football for Shamrock Rovers. He's obviously played in the Conference League at a decent enough level, and I think he might step up. And again, I think that left back position is really anybody's at the moment. We've now got 4. There's been a lot made of Greg Taylor. Don't know how long that injury is going to be in his shoulder for. Don't think anybody would probably play Bolingora there. Montgomery's there in that position. We saw him come on against Alkmaar. Again, I'm not too sure what his right position is going to be, whether it's going to be left back and the left wing. Managers swapped that about and in Scales. But I think that position really is anybody's, and it's up in the air just now.
I hope it's not Juranovic's, though. I don't want to see Juranovic playing at left back, because that didn't look the right balance. I mean, you can tell he's a good player, but I'd far rather see him playing, if he's going to play anywhere, play on the right.
It's frustrating, isn't it, where you've got 2 decent... I mean, because I'm going to say it, Ralston's a decent option at right back. It is frustrating when you've got those 2 decent options, and then on the left-hand side, you're actually wondering who is your first choice. I think Taylor is the first choice. But I have been impressed with Montgomery. I think Montgomery uses the ball really, really well. He looks kind of lightweight, but he doesn't seem to get knocked off the ball that easily. And as you're saying, Declan, when it comes to him in the final third, he doesn't get a nosebleed. He's quite comfortable up there, because obviously he's played, further up the field in his earlier days. I'm talking about him as if he's a veteran. He's only 19 in his earlier days. There's a message coming on YouTube. Michel Sharon, is that how you pronounce that? Thanks for joining us. And it's an important message. After all, afternoon all, for anyone who may wish to pay their last respects to Danny Martin, then his cortege will pass Haratis, which is a pub that Declan drinks in at times.
Herities, Paul.
Herities. See, I didn't drink in pubs, Declan, sorry. At 11:30 a.m. this coming Saturday, and it's Herities. The family have decided on a private funeral. So thank you for informing us. Thank you, Declan, for giving me the correct pronunciation of the establishment. And obviously there will be a lot of people wishing to pay their respects, Declan. So it's Herities. Nice one. Right, now, moving on to our other centre half, Carter Vickers. There has been a bit of a sensation online, JP, which is great. It's great to see. And we now have another wee friendship developing, but it's not a new friendship. It's something that's been revitalised with Catholic United, because, of course, our links with them go right back to them wearing the green and white hoops that were presented or gifted to them by Sir Robert Kelly back in 1968. I think they've gone from about 2,000 odd followers on Twitter right up to 5 figures and growing. Their merch is selling out. Their player sponsorships have sold out, because I actually sent them a message and said, ACSOM would do a sponsorship of one of your players, but there's none available. Tremendous to see, isn't it? It's superb to see that, isn't it?
It is. I'd never heard of them. I didn't know anything about them until I think they replied to your post about the book, about the Celtic jersey book, and said, and then they just dropped a wee link to their strip. And as soon as I saw that link, I thought, oh my God, they're going to sell an absolute bucket load of them. And they must, I think they probably have done in the last, 4 or 5 days. And then the pictures of Carter Vickers wearing a strip as a young boy, and he obviously played for them. So you don't need to tug on the heartstrings too much to join the dots and make a lineage between those 2 clubs, and the fact that he's now playing for the real hoops as opposed to the tribute hoops. So it's great, and I don't even know, are they based in London? Where are they based?
It's Southend-on-Sea, I think it is.
Oh, is it? Right, okay.
Yeah. But the thing is, we have these friendships with clubs and they develop in many different ways. So it's just brilliant to see how this has unfolded. There has been a connection in the past, back in the 60s, and here we are all these years later.
Oh, but then you get slagged for having affection for other clubs, or you can only have affection for Celtic, really. You can't like another club or have a fondness for another club, but God forbid. Like I get battered on Twitter the other day for being excited about Cristiano Ronaldo signing for Manchester United. Sorry that one of the greatest players is returning to my favoured team down south, who have an affiliation with Celtic, whether you like it or not. Watch the Three Kings, watch Jock Stein and Sir Matt Busby, and that handover, and Jock Stein saying, "I hope the next team with their hands on this trophy is yours." And lo and behold, it was. So, I don't get this. Why is it okay to like St. Pauli, but you can't like anybody else? It's just because Celtic and St. Pauli have this, close affiliation. Celtic have affiliations with a lot of clubs, and I don't see the issue. By the way, Celtic Man United, Celtic first and foremost, and in any competitive game, I'm Celtic first and foremost. There's no way I'd be supporting Man United over Celtic, but yeah, if you've got an affiliation with a club, and now we have an affiliation with them, if you get slagged for having a top, one of their tops or one of their trackies, then it's a bit of a sad state of affairs.
The thing with this, JP, I remember growing up and there was certain affinities with English clubs, and then we would play a lot of testimonial games, and then you start looking at the history of the clubs and where it originated. So I think because the only way you would ever play these teams would be in European competition, you're not actually competing domestically for anything, then it's only natural that you might have an affinity elsewhere. And then obviously, moving into the 1980s, late 80s with the St. Pauli thing, which has grown, and there's this shared ideology in terms of a political state of mind as well with their fan base. Is there any affinities that you have, Declan, or is it like the old interviews you used to see in the shooting the match, who's your second team, Celtic reserves?
Yeah, it is Celtic first and foremost, but I do have a soft spot, as you know, for Manchester United as well. And again, that's due to old players playing for them. King Henrik Larsson having played for both clubs, and then I've got a decent enough relationship with Paddy Cairns as well, who played for both Celtic and Man United. So a lot of the guys had their testimonials against Man United, as they did Liverpool. But I think it's up to really anybody, whoever else they like to tune in to watch. I like to watch German football and watch Dortmund as well, and in Bayern Munich, and I watched PSG the other night. I say I've got an affinity for them, but I like to watch other football, because the other night was very bizarre to see Lionel Messi in a different football kit. I think it broke French TV football viewing figures, but there's teams I like to watch because they just play good football and I enjoy football.
Yeah, absolutely.
Some people even have Bournemouth as their second team, bizarrely enough.
They'd always pick Bournemouth when they were playing Subbuteo as a child. I'm sure they did. Absolutely. I think somebody's coming in to wind you two up. Celtic, Man City, Johnny Ryan. There you go.
A Billy McNeil connection there. There is a big Billy connection.
Yeah, and McCarthy and Jerry Craney as well.
Giorgio Samaras.
Yeah, there are connections there with various clubs. And then we've got various others coming in saying that we've got Everton. There was definitely an association back in the 80s there. And when I was down, actually, JP, speaking to Edgar Summertime-Jones, the great musical icon who has flown under the radar for many, many years. He's an Everton fan, and his good lady was showing me pictures of her son and grandson wearing the hoops. And she explained all about that. If you're an Everton fan and your Scottish club's always going to be Celtic. So absolutely love it. I do love it. I've done the whole St. Pauli thing, went over there. Their bar's called the Jolly Roger, and I pronounced that one correctly, Declan. So I would recommend that to anybody. And Catholic United, get them checked out. We tried to sponsor one of their players, but all the sponsorship was gone. Now, you mentioned Ronaldo earlier on there. JP obviously was in action last night, broke a record, most international goals for a male footballer. and he was up against Ireland. And I've been informed in the comment section that Shane Duffy had another cracking game. So it just shows you how last season seemed to engulf a lot of players, experienced players. Shane Duffy, for example, who has captained Ireland. You've got, Diego Lixol, who at the time was at AC Milan after I think he signed for AC Milan for about 12 million quid. He had played in the World Cup for Uruguay and made it to the team of the tournament. So, there's a whole issue about last season, and there's a whole load of reasons for that. But because of that, JP, our Bournemouth fan, Ryan Christie, was the player that I felt we could have retained and we could have got a tune out of. It looked good. I think the signs were good since Ange came back in. And if there was any disappointment of any of the players leaving, there was a hint of resignation about all the others, certainly in my view. But I thought Ryan Christie was the one we could have got a tune out of. Was there any disappointment from you, or are you on the other side of that saying, well, if he doesn't want to be here, let the guy go?
No, I'm definitely, these guys that wanted to go should have gone at the time that they should have gone. And we might not have found ourselves in the situation that we were in, whereby we had a dressing room full of guys that were, their heads were out the door. I know I've said that before, but their heads were out the door. And clearly Ryan Christie just wanted a move. Anyway, I mean, you're not trying to tell me that he has a real fondness for Bournemouth Football Club. I mean, he just wanted a move, wanted to go somewhere, wanted to get a better contract and test himself somewhere else, and that's totally fine. I don't have an issue with that, but it should have been allowed to happen way before now. If it was clear that he wasn't going to sign a new deal, it should have been. I don't know if it was COVID's to blame or not. If no one came in for him last season or last summer, then that's neither the player or the club's fault. That's just the climate that we find ourselves in. But I was starting to warm to the idea and thinking maybe he's changed his mind. Maybe he likes what he's, the team that he's playing in. He likes what Ange Postecoglou has got to implement and say. And then he played on Sunday, and he didn't play for me. And that is yet another game against them that he hasn't done anything. And I just thought, right, okay, if you're not going to do it on this stage, then I'm okay. I'll make my peace with you going, and wherever it is you go, fine. If we get money for you, great. But we've brought in Jota, and you've got. I think we're okay on that. I think Montgomery could even play further forward than people have said that into that left position. But Christie, it's the same with Edouard. It was heartbreaking to watch all these pictures of Edouard in the Crystal Palace shirt, and and then the video where they nicked the "I want to be Edouard," I have to admit, it was well done. It was cool what they did on a very, looked like it was a kind of last minute idea, like, oh, let's film you walking into a record shop and picking up the Stone Roses, because it wasn't exactly a big production thing. It was quite, looked like it might have been done on an iPhone. But it was good anyway, and as much as it sticks in the throat a little bit for them to steal, but let's face it, it's the Celtic fans' song. I mean, the Green Brigade, I think it was the Green Brigade started it. I saw St Johnstone had jumped on the glass of champagne / scooter song as well, so they've appropriated that for their players, which whatever. But Eddie leaving, it was time for him to go, wasn't it? I mean, it was. I wish he'd left in a blaze of glory with a goal against them at Ibrox, because that would have been. I mean,
he should have.
Parallel universe, he scores that, and they implode, because that's what would have happened. But we didn't get that. They didn't get that rub, and he's away, and I hope he does well down there. I hope he, gets back to the level that we all know, because it was only good for Celtic and their player sales in the future. My friend Chris said to me yesterday that he thought the Christie and the Ncham transfers might have a bad impact or a negative impact on our potential sales going forward, because it's like, well, you've only sold 2 first-team players to Swansea City and Bournemouth, and that's not really where we should be aiming to sell our players. Like, obviously, if Ncham goes to Porto for a big fee, then that makes Celtic look good. If Ryan Christie goes to a Southampton or something like that for a fee, then that makes Celtic look good. So, you want Eddie to go down there and tear it up in the Premiership if he can at that size of club. I don't know, because it obviously puts us in a good light, and you kind of want, even no matter what's happened, you want Celtic players to do well. I think you said that the other day in one of the bulletins. You want.
Yeah.
You want these guys who have done a job for you, and they did do a job for us. There's no question. Anybody slating Eddie has got short memories of what he did in a Celtic jersey. It was absolutely unbelievable. So you get what you pay for, as you said.
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a few different ways to look at this, and I'm going to pitch a couple of them at you as well. But on that point, I remember a chat I had with Bernie Slavin, Middlesbrough legend, big Celtic fan. And he spoke about some of the players that went down, around about the time of Gordon Strachan. So they signed quite a lot of players from the Scottish game. And they took down, Scott McDonald went down, Willo Flood, Chris Killen, Barry Robson, as well as Chris Boyd, Kevin Thompson. Quite a lot of players went down from our league. And, for the best part, not all of the players were big players in Scotland, but, you had a player who was a top goal scorer for Celtic. You had a player who, like him or loathe him, he scored goals in Scotland, and Chris Boyd. And they went down there and they actually failed. Every single one of them failed. Big McManus, in fact, went down there as well. And Bernie Slavin says, he's down there and he's constantly trying to big up Scottish football. And he works for Middlesbrough, he does a lot of hospitality there. And then they bring down half a dozen players from their game and they all flop. And he's like, well, I don't have an argument. So absolutely, I do think it's an advert for Celtic. The Encham Christie point your pal made there, I think, is a good one. But what I would ask, and before I get on to it, is, some of the players that have left, and then fairly recently, and Tierney and a wee bit before him, and Dembele, as long as we've done the deals well, obviously it can't be the case when Encham was a free agent when he signed with Swansea. As long as we've done the deals well, we might get that second payday, and I think that is absolutely massive, and it could be quite lucrative when you look at the list of players, maybe the last 5 players who have gone for reasonably big fees. Now, Owen McGrandle's still on the theme of other clubs. United have always been my English team since the 1980s, always got their highlights on Scott Sport. That's a wee throwback. Great attacking principles. I watched McClare when he signed for United. I watched Dalglish when he signed for Liverpool. You kind of follow certain players. Nicholas when he went to Arsenal. But in terms of English football, it's always probably been Liverpool for me. I always liked Liverpool, and I think getting to know the history of Steen and Shankly's relationship as well. And of course, at one point we had the links with the likes of Brendan Rodgers, but I went a wee bit sour at Celtic Park. So although I could never say I've supported an English team, because for me, you've got to go to the games and stuff. And I've said this before, I've probably been to St James's Park more often than any other football ground in England. But I've always had that affinity, and I do like Liverpool. But on that note, I mean, Liam Scales spoke about it in his interview with the Celtic TV. He says, you're growing up where I was growing up. Everybody's team is Celtic, plus the team that you support. That was the words that he said, right? And I think what he meant was the English team that you support. So, everybody supports Celtic, but the team that they support might be Liverpool, Man U, and so on. And there's probably a few English teams now that have entered the consciousness of these football fans who 10, 15, 20 years ago wouldn't have been well supported in Ireland. I'm guessing, teams like Man City, who have only just come to the fore in the last couple of decades or so. Now, one of the big things as well, talking about Eddie, and we've already chatted about songs that have been played at Celtic Park and Chelsea Dagger. You'll Never Walk Alone is one of the big Celtic / Liverpool anthems as well. But I Want to Be Edward, or I Want to Be Adored, that was one that, it was the originality of the Celtic supporters. It's now become one of these football chants that you find in various other football parks. But like the Armstrong chant, Declan, it's now going to be sang by a group, perhaps, or a full stadium of Crystal Palace fans. Obviously, Southampton have nicked our Shooty Armstrong song. What were you thinking when you seen that? I mean, I don't like when it's a player like him, a star player like Eddie. I didn't like seeing him in the Palace jersey, but I've got to admit, I thought that was quite a cute video. I thought it was pretty well put together. Fair play to the social media team at Palace.
I was watching Deadline Day in Sky Sports News, and the presenter, and he's English accent, started singing it, and I cringed big time. Then I saw the video and I thought that's actually quite good. But that's quite good, but no, in a good way. To us, it's always disappointing to see a person that's gave you a lot of happy memories leave the football club. We're watching Edward, especially that treble cup final, which is a day that will live long in the memory for every Celtic fan. He's 2 goals in that game, so he wrote his way into Celtic history, maybe not in a big way like others, but he certainly got his place there in terms of more recently. And it will be interesting to see how he gets on down there. He's went down there for a relatively big fee. He is going to be in a big wage. Selhurst Park makes a lot of good noise, but again, doing a bit of transition. Obviously, a lot of years under Roy Hodgson, moving to Patrick Vieira, who it didn't really work out for in France when he was there. It'll be interesting to see how he gets on and whether or not Palace have a good or a bad season and what kind of part Edward plays in that. Because I would imagine if Palace have a bad season but Edward is still banging in goals, he probably will get a move somewhere else. Or Palace have a good season, he's banging in the goals, he'll get the move somewhere else. So he's a top quality football player in his day. But I think it was probably right for both parties, for the club in terms of what we could cash in on him, and for the players' development to part ways.
Yeah, we spoke about the Dundee dressing room. Charlie Adam reckons we would have got £5 million for him, and I think he then fell for a fantasy football fee, £6.5 million on Twitter. But when I do look at it, and sorry, Dick.
I'm just going to say that's £5 million probably to Charlie, and then 40% of the profit to PSG and all that stuff. So really, it would only work out £2 million odd or something. Probably not even worth our time selling him, was it? Brilliant, yeah.
But the thing with him is, and it's kind of one of these parallel universes. I'm going to bring in a comment for Kev Graham on the comment section. But I just feel that had he developed under Brendan Rodgers at Celtic Park, we'd be talking about different fees and different moves for Rodgers and Edward. I know it's cloud cuckoo land, but I just feel that his development and the management of Rodgers, the coaching of Rodgers, was key to how things have turned out, because obviously last season we know what happened there. He's kind of lost a bit of momentum. There might have been a tiny wee glimmer of hope when Ange came in that he might be able to get something out of him. But I just think the departure of Rodgers, there was quite a few players who could have been much, much better for Celtic. But Kevin Graham is coming in on the comment section. He's out of isolation today. Still very fatigued physically and mentally. Wouldn't wish it on anyone. So everybody needs to be safe out there. We'll be talking about vaccine passports in a wee minute with our political correspondent, Declan McConville. However, on the note of Kev, Kevin is now fully engulfed in developing ACSOM's publishing arm. I was going to say department, but it's a department of one, which is Kevin Graham. We've got 3 manuscripts from various different authors, one of which is Kevin, actually, which are good to go. They're ready to go. We're obviously not going to release all 3 books in one go, but that's something that people have come to us over the years and said, I'm writing this book, would ACSOM publish it? So there's 3 books good to go. Kevin's is going to be the first one that we release via ACSOM Books. And then there's going to be quite a big project which will kick into place at the beginning of next year. So Kevin is taking care of all of that. And in the meantime, he has decided to step away from the live production duties of the ACSOM Bulletin, but he will still be working on Scream of Celica, which is part of his avatar there. That's the logo for Scream of Celica. It won't be a live broadcast. It's going to be one of the ones that we do in the studio, fully produced, lights, camera, action, all that kind of stuff, fully edited. So it might be more like a once a month gig. But that's because we don't want to do everything that we do on a live streaming kind of service as the ACSOM Bulletin is doing right now. So Kev will be back. Don't worry, you will hear his dulcet tones again. He was called a tutor when I made that announcement earlier on. I don't think he minds that because I'm called the exact same. So there you go. He'll be looking after all the books, and his latest book, his new book, the debut, will be announced and will be available for Christmas. So I'm pretty sure you will all enjoy that. I know what it is as well.
I'm excited about it.
You know what it is, JP. Absolutely. There is a link there. It will all become clear. But on the subject of COVID, Declan, what's your thoughts on the vaccine passports and how it's going to affect Scottish football?
Yeah, it's something that we've been speaking about in the podcast for a few months now. When there was first kind of murmurs of this, majority of politicians in the country seemed to be against it due to the fact that there's there's going to be a crossover here, because again, there's people out there who can't get vaccinated by choice because they may have other health issues and whatnot. So it all depends on what the legislation is around this in terms of how those people fit into play, because I don't think it's fair for people who can't get it to be kind of segregated from the rest of society due to the fact they can't get it. Again, vaccines came in as an optional procedure for people. Many people would argue now that they're not optional, that it's kind of forcing people to do it. But again, the flip of that is big, large-scale events, whatnot. If you want to go to them, you're going to basically need to take them. I've had to, and I'll be one of the fortunate ones that be able to get the certificate, but I can understand other people who have decided not to take the vaccine and aren't happy about this. He is one of them. And I don't think he'll be probably playing any gigs where that is going to be the case in countries. I know Ireland are one of the countries that do have the certificates in place just now. But again, we're still fresh we're only a few months down the line from elections. We have saw a co-leaders deal between the Greens and the SNP and government. So for this to go through, we do have a minority parliament. So for it to be passed in Parliament, two political parties in the Scottish Parliament are going to have to vote for it to be passed. So it's not a one-party thing. This two parties are going to need to put it through. I think the Joint Response Group, the GRG, yesterday said that it was just going to be a complete disaster for them in terms of queues are bad enough going into Celtic Park just now, and I can't see how this would help that at all. I get that cases are rising. There's a worry about hospitalisations. I don't want us to go back and impose restrictions, but there's a lot to tear apart with this, and I think there's a lot more to come, and that's still to be decided on whether it will get pushed through or not. But it's a worry, I think, for some people, as I say, that can't have the actual vaccine and where their place will be, and how it will help queues and whatnot getting into football stadiums. Again, I don't know why there's maybe not more an emphasis around negative lateral flow tests, which are widely available, because people would then have the peace of mind that festivals, I think, we're doing. Correct me if I'm wrong, JP, but
no, that is
transmit.
Yeah.
But you had to present a negative lateral flow test, which may have been a better idea. But I think there's still a lot more to go in this one.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's always great to have a political correspondent on the show, JP, just to take care of that little bit for us. Thank you very much for that.
No worries.
The curious case of Jack Hendry got me thinking. We spoke about the club, Stend, doing what they had every right to do and buying the player, because it was all written into the contracts, 12 months previously, and then flipping the deal on its head. And then making a big profit, absolutely. But then the news came through that Celtic had a sell-on clause in that deal as well, so we made a bit of money on top of the transfer fee that we got for him, which I think was about 1.7 when we sold him to the Belgian club. So when you're looking at that, and you're looking at sell-on fees, and you look at some of the players that have just departed the building, Odsonne Edouard, Christopher Ajer, Ryan Christie, Kieran Tierney and Moussa Dembele, because obviously Dembele and Tierney have not made that move yet since joining Arsenal and Lyon respectively. When you're looking at that, two things come to mind. You would hope that the way that Peter Lawwell used to work these or build these, structure these deals continues under Dominic Mackay. You would hope that he inherits that and we get a sell on some of these big transfers. But also those 5 players, JP, I'm going to come to you on this one. Dembele, Tierney, Christie, Ajer, Eddie. If and when all 5 of them make their next moves, the transfer fees, the combined transfer fees of those 5 players will be astronomical. I mean, it will be over 100 million quid. That is scary.
I know. I mean, potentially, yeah. I mean, the way things are going with with Tierney at Arsenal, and the way that that's sort of playing out there, you'd expect somebody to maybe swoop in for him in January or next summer or something like that. I mean, maybe he'll stay loyal to them and stick it out and see who the new manager's going to be. Imagine if it was Brendan Rodgers. It could happen. So I don't know. I mean, I think they're all very likely to move. I don't think Dembele will be at Lyon long term. I think he'll want to try his hand in the Premier League at some point, and someone, I would imagine, will probably take a punt. And I remember there was talk of Manchester United going for Dembele at one point.
Yeah. Yep.
I don't think they've got any need for him now when they've got Cristiano Ronaldo in the door, as well as Cavani and, you know, Greenwood, Martial, Rashford, you name it. They've got a plethora of strikers now. But I think, yeah, you're right. They could all reel in a lot of money. But with regards to the Jack Hendry thing, I don't want to keep beating the drum about this, but I see people talking about Jack Hendry, and they're like, "Oh, he was an absolute disaster for Celtic. He was a horrible player. He had so many nightmares for us." And I've studied this. He didn't have that many bad games for Celtic. He was involved in a run of 3 games where we lost all 3 games, and I think Celtic fans have attributed those 3 losses to Jack Hendry and Jack Hendry alone. And you've got the gif of him running around at Partick Thistle as well. With regards to how this is played out with Ostend, he could have, that whole thing could have been a terrible season for him. He could have not developed there at all, not played well for them, and he would have come back to us and we would have been in the same position. So I think it's credit to Ostend that they coached him well, they gave him the platform, they trusted him, everything was agreed at that point. So to then spit the dummy about him being sold by them to a club in Belgium who had obviously closer inspection of him whilst he was playing there, I think it's ridiculous to be like, oh, well, why should they get to, how is he going for this sort of money? He's going for that sort of money because he played really well into a high level in Belgium. And, we'd agreed the fee. You can't go changing the goalposts after, just because something goes well, and I don't blame him for signing for Ostend, and I don't blame him for, moving to Bruges. He's going to be playing the Champions League. And he wasn't that bad a player for us. He was a Brendan Rodgers signing. He's a Scottish international. I just think there's this weird, it's just people make up their minds whether they don't like somebody, and it feels like they just have to stick with it and just keep going, double down. This guy's terrible. He's terrible. Good riddance. And it's like the guy's clearly proving you wrong right now by the fact that he's now north of £7 or £8 million player. So anyway, that was my Jack Hendry rant.
No, I think it's fair comment, JP. And also, you're talking there about an affection for Man U. I was interested to watch the Gary Neville interview with Roy Keane. I thought it was brilliant.
Oh yeah,
and he was talking about this. It was good, wasn't it?
Very good.
Interestingly enough, Dick, when asked about managerial positions, he spoke about the Championship. He never mentioned Celtic.
No, and I noticed that as well. But I thought some of the stories were brilliant. Very, very funny.
I know. Absolutely. One of the things I thought was very interesting was he was talking about perception within football. So it goes right back to what you just said there, JP. There's this perception that he was an absolute bomb scare. So you think every game he played, he was rubbish. Jack Hendry, I'm talking about. But actually, when you focus on it, it might not have been the case. And it's just a perception that's built up. Again, by the way, I'm not rewriting history. I'm not being a revisionist.
I'm not saying he was Franz Beckenbauer, by the way, but I'm not. But at the same token, he wasn't absolutely terrible for Celtic either. I just think he played in an unsettled defence at times with, possibly De Vries as the keeper. I can't remember, but he didn't play in a cohesive unit, and a lot was expected of him at a young age, and in quite high profile games as well. Away at Tynecastle, away at Salzburg in the Europa League, I think was one of the games. So I think he was rushed into the team at that time, and I think there's a parallel universe where Jack Hendry did a lot better at Celtic, and we would maybe be reaping the benefits of what he's currently doing now, but it just didn't work out at the time.
Big thing I would say about him is after the difficulties I had at Celtic, because I remember him getting involved in a few online spats with Celtic fans on social media. It was also quite obviously getting to him, The move didn't work out. That affects a player on a mental level. Of course it does. And I don't mean that they then suffer mental health, but it will affect their mood. It will affect how they're feeling at that particular time. It might affect their mental health long term. But then he goes to Australia and you think, right, fresh start, and he gets a terrible injury. So fair play to Jack Hendry. From that point of that shocking injury that he got over in Australia, right, to come back and rebuild his career the way he has done. He's gone over to Belgium, unknown territory, really impressed over there, to the point where one of the top clubs who's playing Champions League football, JP, like you say, are prepared to spend a big fee on him. He's battled his way into Steve Clarke's Euro squad, regardless of what his performances were over there. So fair play to him for rebuilding his career. I think that's fantastic.
Well, like Declan said, it's about application. It's about application. Declan said earlier on about Ncham. It's about application. And he's put the groundwork in. They haven't signed him. Ostend didn't sign him, out of sympathy or anything like that. Club Brugge haven't signed him out of sympathy. You don't go and spend that level of money on somebody that you don't think is going to do a job for you. And, he's now at one of the top teams in Belgium, or the top team in Belgium. So I've got no affiliation to Jack Hendry. I've never met the guy, don't know anyone that knows him. I don't know what he's like as a person. I'm just basing it purely on the fact that he was a guy that played for Celtic. He was signed at a young age. I wanted him to do well because he was Scottish, and I'm pleased for him. From a distance as a Celtic fan, that he's doing well in a decent league, and he's got a hell of a move. And he's not only getting the money; he's at a top club. It's not as if he's just at some shan club but he's getting loads of money. He's at a top club and he's going to be playing Champions League football. So
fair play, Jack Hendry. Listen, it's always an absolute pleasure on a Thursday speaking to Declan and JP, but also dipping in and out of the comment section. If anybody knows Tony Cassidy, I did say Tony, not Terry, because Terry Cassidy's always in the back of my mind. Tony Cassidy, who has won the platinum disc that we're giving away for being a subscriber on our YouTube channel. If anyone knows him, tell me, get in touch. We're all over social media, easy enough to get in touch with us, or leave a wee comment in the comments field and we can get in touch via email and drop it off if he is local. Thanks for joining us on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Twitch, and everywhere else. And join us again tomorrow at 12:30 for a Celtic State of Mind.